Hello and welcome to Screams from the Center. In this broadcast, I hope to provide information on topics that I find interesting and give my take on them. My name is David, and welcome to my channel. This episode, Can We Criticize Islam? Recently, I was watching one of my favorite YouTubers called Atheism-is-unstoppable, and he's been on a rant about a topic I'd like to talk about. Can we say, to start with, that any kind of shooting, beheading, bombing, or so forth that happens, and the people who do it are Muslim, can we say that they're Muslim extremist? Can we say this without sounding like Fox News or the right-wing media? Or should we have a more tempered approach and not necessarily mention the religion, like other media outlets such as MSNBC, the Young Turks, and other news organizations that are often considered more left-wing? Is there a middle ground here? I'd like to expand this briefly, though I won't go into a lot of detail, to include things like police and figures of power. I also feel that the media gives them a bit of a whitewash or too much of a spotlight, depending on which side of the argument you fall on. My take in this is we need to be honest in reporting. If someone of the Islamic faith is acting in accordance to their faith and doing acts in the name of their faith, then I think it's fair to mention that as a factor. Just as I think if the police act out of line, it should be mentioned. Also, if the terrorist is a Christian, it should be mentioned. Nobody should whitewash it, and nobody should put a spotlight on it. It should be reported as a point of fact without an agenda. My issue is the dishonesty from both sides. It's how they use the titles or present the stories that concerns me. So recently, this YouTuber, Atheism-is-unstoppable, commends Bill O'Reilly for being clear that Muslims were the terrorists in the attacks against Charlie Hebdo. For the record, yes, it was Muslim extremists, followers of Islam, and they did that in the name of their faith because they were offended by what this magazine did. I'd like to point out that a majority of Muslims worldwide, including moderates, say that drawing, criticizing, or having a negative opinion of Islam is punishable. They want blasphemy laws that can include death sentences. So now that that fact is out of the way, I can point out a growing group of Christians who either wish for something identical, either directly or indirectly, with public policy and law. But I will say they shot up or bombed the place far less. Meaning, yes, Christians do this as well, in lesser numbers. It doesn't excuse them, and it doesn't dismiss the fact that many of them are Christians and do that in the name of their Christian faith. Bill O'Reilly is right to point out these facts. Young Turks tend to sidestep pointing to this in the titles of their videos. So if you look at their videos, if they're about a Muslim extremist, oftentimes they don't mention that. They'll mention it in the body of the segment, but not necessarily in the title. This does make Atheism-is-unstoppable correct as well. But where I disagree with Fox and Bill O'Reilly is why they do it. They do not point to the religion of the attackers for the sake of journalism. It's for an agenda. The agenda is propagating a fundamental hatred of Islam. This is done with the sole purpose of promoting fear, and fear specifically towards Muslims. There is no nobility in Fox covering this type of terrorism. They're doing it to scare their white audience and make them hate Muslims for being a different religion. They're not reporting on the religion as a whole. And they often whitewash some moderate groups who do say that these attacks are wrong. Now, we could go into detail about how Fox tries to goat them into other things, but for the most part, moderate Muslims condemn these actions, at least publicly. I think commenters who have legitimate problems with religion should be very careful not to embrace the Fox News reporting standard. I know I am. Well, that's it for this episode. I'm hoping you get a bit of information and enjoyed. Please subscribe to me, and I'll get more out as fast as possible. Thank you for joining me.